Alright, I finished For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemmingway, written in 1940. For Whom the Bell Tolls. And, what? Yeah. Next page, 1940. So, the basic story is fiction, told from his experiences in Spain. He was a war correspondent, Ernest Hemmingway. So he has some experience there, and he wrote a story based upon it was between World War I and World War II, during the Spanish uprising between the Fascists and the Anarchists. And the way it sounds is Russia and America dipped their hats into this conflict a little bit, particularly by taking the communist or anarchist side. They're not called revolutionaries; they're more called nationalists. They consider themselves nationalists fighting the fascists, but they really align with the anarchists as well. And this story revolves around Robert Jordan. Alright, I second guessed myself about his last name for some reason. And he's an American coming over as a soldier to help out this small group that was living in a cave. His sole purpose, and this book only spans the course of 3 days. 3 days, 471 pages for 3 days of interactions with a lot of detail and backstory. It's not just events during the course of the time he was there. They had some backstories, some conversations that took up quite a few pages. His sole purpose was to bomb a bridge. He goes over under some orders from just sympathizers working in Spain. This small group had a bridge bomber expert, explosives expert, who died. So then Robert Jordan was sent over, and it was 3 days. He got there, and he had to wait those 3 days under orders because there was going to be an attack within those 3 days. So it was all a part of the plan for him to bomb the bridge on a timed basis, not just randomly blow it up when he's good and ready. It had to be to coordinate with a particular attack. And as we all know in history, the anarchists lost. The fascists won. All right, this is a tragedy, because we're looking at the side of the losers, gypsies, and the nationalists, anarchists. They fought a losing war, and you get an idea of the tribulations they went through during the time they were waiting, just those 3 days. There was also love. So he found love. I believe they made a movie out of this, and it doesn't look accurate for some of the video I've seen. Robert Jordan found love for the first time in his life with a young 19-year-old woman who he gave a pet name to of Rabbit. She had her head shaved by these anarchists, or by the fascists, and she watched her mom and dad, who were like communist nationalists, not anarchists, but they just weren't the fascists. Oh no, they were. It was a little confusing at times. But she watched her parents get killed, and then she got her head shaved, and she got just pushed away. She wasn't killed, But then she joined this outlier group of rebels, and they lived in a cave, and they just had conversations, and there was a lot of distrust with one of the guys who started arguments. He drank a lot, which really seemed Pablo. He drank a lot and seemed to cause some problems, but he was the most knowledgeable and effective person there. But he started arguments a little bit, but then he withdrew. He questioned things, and it was kind of disrupting to the people, the soldiers. There was only maybe a group of, we're talking about only like a group of 7 people in this cave on the hill, and they were just they were having issues. They're not the most disciplined group of rebels who were fighting these fascists. They had some interesting thoughts that I wanted to read off. On page 9, they said, "Worry is as bad as fearing." So that Robert Jordan said that he didn't worry that last day or something. And he successfully blew up the bridge, and then he was shot in the leg and died. His bell tolled. At the end, he was just, you got an idea of pretty much what he was going to do at the end. So they didn't really, it feels like an unfinished story, but if you read the book, you know what's going to happen. He's just going to get himself killed. They finished him off as they were closing in on him. On 54, bullfighter talks safety until he gets gored. They had a big conversation about bullfighting and how they talk about the safety of it, what you need to do properly until you get gored. See, there's no perfect way to fight a bull, because the bulls are a little unpredictable. And then they talked later about a short guy, a guy who was too short to be a bullfighter. You really should be a tall person so you could reach over the horns and stab them. If you're short, you're more likely to get hit. It's a little more difficult. So if Pablo, who's a controversial figure, but I mean, I'm glad that they didn't kill him. I was thinking, like, it seems so minor, the reasons why they wanted to kill Pablo. Pablo just questioned, like, not sexuality, but it's just like personal things. He'd question personal things, maybe kind of your loyalty or something, while he was drunk. But it just didn't seem like the questions that Pablo asked didn't seem to me to be reason enough to kill the guy, even though these people were actually secretly debating, should we kill this guy? I didn't see, the way Pablo was acting, I didn't see any good reason that they would have killed him. I would have been seriously disappointed had they killed him, because it didn't seem right to me. But they're talking about how a female would react to Pablo getting killed. You don't really know how they react until it actually happens. That's page 66. U.S. Republicans are not shot in their own country. So that, I think, that's along the lines of a fascist, somebody who wants to maintain, the conservative wants to maintain the way things are, especially if you were if you got a lot of money and stuff. But in Spain, they're a little different. 85. Valencia melon is for eating. Castile melons are for self-abuse. I found that interesting. These are the thoughts that I find interesting. They're talking about how some melons are better from another city. On page 120, that was about the time they say long live drunkenness. So there were a group in a city, this particular city, I forget the name of it. It's not a big one, where they killed like 7 fascists, and these fascists were pretty much store owners, government officials, people who have some kind of authority, some kind of power. They were just killing them and calling them fascists. But how they did it was just like very barbaric. They got the farmers and the anarchists got in a line, and the fascists were to run between the line, and then the people would beat the fascists. Like one guy was really fat, and he was a store owner. People felt a little sorry for him, and wanted to give him some mercy, wanted to give him a quick death. And at the end of the line was a cliff that they would just throw this they call fascist off of. It's really hard to read that. All right, because I now believe I have some sympathy for fascists, the people who keep things in order, make the buildings, just make the money, manage the money and stuff. Some fascists get out of order, but to make a broad sweep of wanting to kill all fascists, well, that's real anarchism. That's real anarchy, and that's there are extreme fascists, there are extreme anarchists, there's people in between. I consider myself in between, but I could see how there's a conflict between the extremes, and it really is brought out in this book. This isn't the best read, but you learn a lot about the difference between fascists and anarchists just on personal stories. On page 132, military terms: make orders clear and for better discipline. Using military terms, make orders clear, because we're talking about a loose group of nationalists or anarchists. I prefer to call them anarchists, the way they talk, but one guy said he prefers to use military terms to make himself clear. On page 135, Spanish loyalty was shallow. Two people would turn on one, and then those two people would turn on each other. And the Spanish loyalty order, they're saying, would go down to the individual, pretty much, down to their profession, down to their family. But it would start with Spain, and then the district, and then the city, and then their family, and then their profession. But it's not saying much. There is not much. He's saying is there's not much loyalty in Spain amongst the Spanish, and I believe it. 164, he made reference to Sun Valley, Idaho, where he spent some time, and then he spent time in Butte, and he's mentioned Missoula. I've been to all these places, and it's interesting. If you go to Sun Valley, you go to Ketchum, Idaho, particularly, you see a monument to Ernest Hemmingway. But that was late in his life. I think he might have died there. He spent his last years in the Sun Valley area, hunting and whatnot. On page 182, snowstorm. Okay, there are no enemies during a snowstorm. So I found that interesting. During the weather conditions, it's not much ability to fight. Page 184, the rich, the bourgeoisie, eat until they ruin their stomachs, then they need sodium bicarbonate. I thought that was an interesting description of them. On page 188, what's worse than getting gored by a bull? Getting hit by the flat end of the bullhorn, which will give you internal injuries. And they're saying I think it was a short bullfighter, he got hit. He never got gored, because he could hardly ever reach over the bull anyway. He was getting hit by the flat of the horn and getting some nasty injury, probably to the gut. And how that ended his career. On page 207, the ranges for cattle, I just thought that it was interesting how in the summer they'll put them in the highlands, in the forested areas, which apparently are mostly government controlled, and then in the winter time they'll bring the cattle down to the low range, which is going to be a little bit warmer, and that's based on elevation and the difference in the temperatures. Page 227, ride wheel with troll drunks. Oh, that was Pablo arguing Robert Jordan, who they say his full name every time. And also, let me just say, they also say thee and thou and whom. They're using this author was using a lot of these old time terms, and I didn't quite understand why. It was thee and thou, like we're reading from the Bible. He's like writing like he was writing for the Bible in a way, with the conversations between everybody. Everybody talked with thee and thou and all of that. So those words, thy. It's instead of saying my, it'd say thy in this book. It's like reading from the Bible. So Pablo was kind of trolling Robert Jordan and the others a little bit. It's just a little bit back and forth, spit spat, just chit chat, and this is a second time or third time that it happened where people are getting their emotions high, like just getting offending each other. So Robert Jordan is saying, I'm not going to ride the wheel again, because it just circles back around with arguments. Arguments circling is like riding a wheel. On page 243, travel, okay, if you travel from important places, it makes you look important. So when you come to people, you're like, oh, I've come from a very important place, and now it looks like I am an important person. And it's kind of a trick. You put a trick on people, making it look like you're more important than you are by coming from the considered important places. I found that interesting. And the best way to keep the trick going is just to keep traveling. It's kind of like what I'm doing in a way, I guess. Coming from an important place. I came from San Francisco. Oh, what do I know? I must know quite a bit. Got some insight from San Francisco, which I pretty much put all that on video, what I know. On page 253, after a person died, the gypsies said they could smell the death. So people in the aftermath, after death invention, they then say, oh, I could see it coming. He looked gray in the face. He had a different demeanor to him, appearance. I could tell. I could smell it on him. And they'll say that after the fact, all right, because it's then clear what led up to the death, rather than as the person is dying. It's maybe not so clear. They could recover. In page 260. Robert Jordan talked about his time in Missoula, about how he remembers the burnt smell of leaves in the street. And I've been to Missoula, and that place is a pollution capital of Montana, as far as I've seen so far. And I believe it's because of the way the mountain ranges are set up and how it affects the winds. I think the area, the mountains, which mountains are nearby, I think they are a wind block in some way, and they contain the pollution, because it is bad there. It's not bad around here. This is a lot nicer. I started questioning the pollution standards for Montana in Missoula. It's really bad, and if he remembers burnt leaf smell, talking about it, 1940, the book is written. Before that, I believe that burnt smell lingers a long time. If anything burns in Missoula, it's going to linger a long time. There's a lot of reference to obscenity. This guy would not write actual swear words, the F word, the S word, all of that. Instead, he'd just say obscenity. And I got some phrases here that I found interesting. I didn't start really recording it until page 274. I obscenity in the milk. Oh, obscenity them. Obscenity them in the milk of their filth. And some of the females are actually saying this too, so... I obscenity in the midst of the holy mysteries that I am alone. And that was this guy trying to prove that as he was approaching a guard shack that he was by himself. I obscenity in the midst of the holy mysteries. Go obscenity yourself. Obscene your transmission. A vehicle broke down, got in a car wreck. Obscene your transmission. The transmission went out. Get this other obscenity off the road. And that was for the vehicle. So there were situations where you just say obscenity instead. I think he was trying to make this book as like the standards for fornication, for just offensive words was a lot higher back then. So this book is influenced by that. A lot of old books I've read just, they don't refer to swearing a lot at all in conversation, whereas Ernest Hemmingway wanted to really capture, because he was there in Spain, and I mean we're talking about people all these conversations were in Spanish, and there were a lot of Spanish phrases that they used that he would translate in the book. I don't feel like I learned any new Spanish, but he used some Spanish phrases in it. Alright, on page 285, in the left pocket, I keep our papers for us. On my right pocket, I keep the papers for the fascists. So it's kind of using a deception there for whoever he encounters. On page 304, no man has a right to take another man's life unless it is to prevent something worse happening to other people. And that has to do with just law enforcement in general. Okay, no cop has a right to arrest you unless if it's to prevent something worse happening to other people. All right, but that's really getting pushed. That issue is getting pushed. We're talking back then is they're talking about killing other people, but it's being used in a lighter fashion with just regular law enforcement today. It's kind of like the law today is the fascists, and we got a bunch of anarchists who rail against nationalists, constitution. Instead of nationalists now, we're constitutionalists. 305, anarchist mind. When things get bad, they set fire to something and want to die. All right, that's the anarchist mind. They just want to just destroy everything, and then they want to die themselves. Anarchists sacrifice themselves. They are crazy. And that's what we see with Antifa. They're anarchists. They're anti-fascists. Fascists against the anarchists. You got that conflict there, and it's really something how that's working out. It's continuing on today, but we don't have them hiding in caves and trying to blow up bridges in America. It can come to that, but there's definitely something that's setting the difference. Spain is definitely a different country. 328, barbarian fascists, they lack dignity, so we need to take all their stuff. That's how you teach the barbarian fascists dignity. All right, because the fascists have killed off anarchists, so the anarchists get angry about that. And there was, in the story they talk about Sordo getting killed, and that was a result of an encounter. Pretty much there were planes at that time, so the planes destroyed a lot of these compounds, these caves, and they had to live in caves just to try to survive the bombings. All right, then 338, I found it interesting. Robert Jordan wanted to talk to his granddad, and he spent a couple paragraphs at least talking about how it would have be nice right now to talk to his granddad as he's older and understands more things, because he's thinking his granddad withheld telling him things as a child because his granddad may not have felt that he would understands the things that the granddad would talk about. You would only understand what he's talking about when you're older, but how do you bring it up now in conversation? And it'd be nice to, as you get older, I'd like to talk to my grandpa now at this time, and if he could just stay the same age and I get older, then being able to talk to him now would make for a more lively conversation than when I was 6 years old. I mean, a lot changes, but you don't get that opportunity because that's how life works. Page 349, they're saying eat fried is healthy. Eating fried food is more healthy. All right, and maybe there is some truth to that. Maybe the types of fats they used didn't have bleach added, didn't have sodium hydrochloride to change the flavor of it, to take out the smells of it, and running it through a heat press and solvents and all that. They probably didn't really deal with that factory, that pharmaceutical factory fats. So it could have been healthier. I don't know. As they mentioned, the red nun. This is Margaret Rabbit. We'll call her Rabbit. Where she got her head shaved. That's when they're saying, we'll turn you into a red nun. I'm not sure what the red nun is. On 355, Spain, okay, with forgiveness. Forgiveness is a Christian idea. Spain was never Christian. So they seek revenge all the time. On page 367, this man is talking about blinding a partridge so it would not fly away. All right, but he wanted to use the partridge for calls, and it sounds like for hunting maybe or something. But imagine blinding pets. And that seems to be a trend today with cats. I've been seeing more pictures of blind cats, and I wonder how intentional that has been for some of them, just to prevent them from running away. I know there are some really sick people out there that would do that. 377. The cat is the best anarchist because they bury their mess. They live the most free life, and they bury their mess. The anarchist could learn a lot from a cat. I found that interesting. On page 381, learn fast under pressure, because within the short time that you have, and Robert Jordan only had 3 days and then he was pretty much dead. He became oversensitized and learned faster, and he's talking about how he wished he had that, if he could apply that knowledge that he learned in them 3 days, roughly 2 days, 3 days, as the conversation was going along, if he could apply that to later in life if he got through this, but he didn't. No sequels to this story. For whom the bell tolls two. Yeah. 381 or 386, night plans are no good in the morning. So you think different at night. If you make plans at night, you might want to scrap them in the morning. Page 387, thing of the hand is all gypsy nonsense. Okay, that's the lady, like in the beginning, Pilar, I don't know how her name's pronounced exactly, but she read Robert Jordan's hands and was like making predictions of his future. And later in the book, they're like, well, it's gypsy nonsense just to give her a sense of importance. All right, so really it means nothing. But she was doing that as a way to give control, show that she was in control by reading the hands, using that. So you got to watch out for that. This fortune tellers, it's nonsense in a way to control you. On page 410, the last one, when they're blowing up the bridge, do not think of a man as a man, as a person as a man. Just think of them as a target. Because one of the rebels was getting regretful about killing another soldier, and it's just how he was thinking. He was thinking of the other soldier as a person, and it's taking his life doesn't seem right. So you have to change your mind frame and during time of war and consider them targets.